Welcome to Hack Circus. This week I talked to Nadia Kamil. Nadia is a writer, a comedian, a performer, an actor, many things. I've known Nadia for getting on for 10 years now, I think. I have a feeling I first came across her on MySpace, but no, I met her at the Edinburgh Festival through Richard Herring, I believe. So I've known Nadia for a long time. I say known, our paths have crossed on a regular basis. Nadia was the flight attendant on the Starship Hack Circus show that we did. If you don't know, Hack Circus is also an event series and a magazine, and the events launch the magazines. And we did an event to launch the First Contact theme magazine, and the event was a sort of immersive, space-themed, theatrical event. And anyway, Nadia was the petulant air steward. Nadia now lives in LA and is doing auditions and writing and performing out there. So we talk about the difference between comedy in America and specifically LA and comedy in the UK. Please head over to iTunes and hit the star ratings if you have more than a second, write a review as well, that'd be great. It all really helps. Our website is hackcircuspodcast.com. We are on Twitter at Hack Circus, Facebook is Hack Circus Podcast, and Instagram is Instagram/Hack Circus. We're on there too. And one thing I do on Instagram is draw pictures while I'm talking to people over Skype for some of these interviews, and you can see the sketches I did over Skype on the Instagram, so go and have a look at that. Anyway, let's get on with it. Nadia Kamil. So do you remember that time in Jordan?
Yeah, I do. I did not enjoy it. I did not like it. It did not sit well with me. I got very ill. I was a very sickly child when I was there. I don't think the water sat well with me, and the food I didn't like. I remember being sick for the first 3 months, not being able to go outside and play because I was too ill.
So, yeah, not the most kind of hilarious start for a kind of comedy career, I suppose. But I don't know, is that a good thing to have that kind of, that upheaval or trauma in your childhood, do you think? I don't know if you've thought about that.
Yeah, I definitely have thought about it, because I feel like it is a common denominator in lots of comedians. Not all comedians, but a lot of comedians I feel have darkness in their past. And because comedy is a coping mechanism, it's a defense mechanism. The ability to laugh at something immediately sort of undermines its power over you, and you start to have power over that. I do think that being able to laugh about things is a very powerful tool.
So did you start, did you start becoming funny as a child? Do you remember making up, I don't know, writing stories or doing performances or things as a kid? Were you creative?
I was definitely creative, but I think as a kid I wanted to be a journalist, which seems like a really weird thing for an 8-year-old to want to be. I wanted to be a journalist. I think partly because of Nancy Drew, so I didn't want to be a detective, but I wanted to write about crimes. I think when I was a little bit older I started wanting to perform. But I didn't really realise that comedy was my thing until university. And I think that was when I sort of had an epiphany of oh, I'm funny. I'm not weird, I'm funny. I'm also really shy, and I was always really shy. I'm still quite shy. And at university I was really quite overwhelmed by it, because I went to Cambridge, which is extremely posh from my family's perspective. And it was, I found the whole thing amazing, and it's imbued with history, and it's a beautiful city, and Cambridge, you've lived there. And did you do a master's or something?
I did, yeah.
So you know.
I try not to talk about it. Yeah, yes. It's a very intimidating place to live.
Yeah, really intimidating, especially if you're from a very different cultural background, which because my mother's side of the family is very working class Welsh. And then my dad's side of the family is Arab, Iraqi Arab, which is, just very different worlds to the very upper middle class, upper class sort of prestige and history of Cambridge, which, I don't think it's all great. I think there's a lot of wankers there. But when you're coming from, it is a real culture shock. And I was so sort of shy and nervous about it that it took me a week to even find the buttery in my own college. That's the canteen for non-Cambridge people.
That's posh for a cafe, yeah.
That's where you get your jacket potatoes from. Because I was so shy and nervous to even be going exploring by myself. And it took me 3 weeks to leave the college to go to the other colleges and faculties and stuff. And by that time, all of the plays for your first year plays and stuff, they'd all had all their auditions and things, so I'd missed out. And I ended up having to do costume for a freshers play because I missed all the auditions because I was too shy to leave my college.
God.
Yeah, and then the Footlights, which is the comedy club there, took me until my third year until I had the confidence to sort of join or audition, and it had to be the Virgin Smoker, which is, Smokers are the shows that they do every 2 weeks, usually all new material, and the Virgin Smoker is the one they do at the beginning of the year where anybody can perform as long as you've never done it before, and you don't have to audition. Just anybody who's written something can perform. So, and it was only under those circumstances that I could do it. It had to be no pressure to audition, and everybody else being in the same kind of boat. And after 2 full years of being there, that was me building up the confidence. 2 years at the university before I could join the Footlights.
Do you think it helps being an actor before you try and do comedy? Because, I was talking to someone, a comedian and a writer about this the other day for this show, actually, and he was saying that people are always surprised when stand-up comedians turn up in sitcoms and are good at acting. And he said, what people don't realise, they're acting when they're doing stand-up.
Yeah.
That is an act. And that is, there's a huge amount of skill and performance that goes into pretending you're just coming up with stuff as you walk around the stage.
Well, because I went into sketch. I did sketch for 5 years before I started doing stand-up. And you really, you could get away with doing sketch and not being a very good actor. Like Leon Herring, for example. Neither of those guys are very good actors, let's be honest. But they're very funny comedians, and they had very good ideas. But they're very good at playing their stage personas, which is in itself is a particular skill. But I was doing sketch comedy and playing lots of different kinds of characters, and I think that was a lot of my strength, is in sort of the variety and range and contrast. Being able to go from, huge, overblown caricatures to more subtle, sort of nuanced, detailed things. And I think it really helps in sketch if you're able to do that. And definitely in character. If you're going to do character stuff, you have to be able to sort of differentiate your characters. Yeah.
So have you done, I presume that you haven't done an Edinburgh since you've lived in America?
No, I haven't. And it's weird.
Do you miss it?
Yeah, I do. I do miss it. I miss being there. I don't really miss having a show to create every year, and the pressure of previews and venues and promoting it and all that stuff. But I miss sort of being in the city for that whole month, because it's like a summer camp for you and all your comedian friends, because you just see each other everywhere. You can't walk around without bumping into your friends. You end up being more social there than you get all of your sort of socialising done there for the rest of the year, really.
Have you managed to, you're saying about it's nice having a break from writing a kind of high pressure show.
Yeah.
Have you managed to do any performing in like any? I don't even know what it would be. I've never been to America, so I'm trying to imagine. Everything I've got is like from New York, like it's Seinfeld. Basically, I'm thinking like, do you go to a comedy club and do a little bit about what happened in your week into the microphone, and then go back the next week and do it again? Have you done comedy clubs in LA?
I have. Yeah, I've done a few gigs. I've eased off on them, to be honest, because honestly, it's here, especially in LA, the stand-up scene is a lot less inspiring than it is in the UK. In the UK, it's really vibrant and really exciting, especially the alternative scene is really weird and interesting and playful and welcoming and warm. And here, the alternative scene is nowhere near as alternative, for starters. Like here, just like not doing straightforward observational comedy is considered alternative. Like, and talking about anything that's like, and you know, being a woman and talking about being a woman is considered alternative. And the style of stand-up here is really homogenous. I mean, obviously this is a big brush that I'm tarring a lot of people with. There are exceptions, but generally, especially in the bigger clubs like the Laugh Factory and what are the other ones? The Comedy Store and stuff like that. It's very TV-centric and TV-driven. So a lot of the comedians are working on their, 5-minute bits to do on Conan or whatever, and playing, like, doing that extremely tightly written, very tightly honed, polished 5-minute sets, and performing for the audience in their mind instead of the audience that's right in front of them, like the TV audience. And there are some cool gigs, like there's these couple of college kids who run this show called Cerberus, which they just move around and do in different spaces, like a laundrette and a library, and I think now it's got like a residency in his grandparents' front lawn, which is really sweet. And for some reason, he'll get like, mostly it's him and his friends doing their stand-up, which is, it's okay. It's fine. But then he'll get like a couple of people who are great comics doing interesting stuff, performing on his grandparents' front lawn. His grandparents don't speak English, they only speak Spanish. Like abuela and abuelo. And he'll put on like super sort of hardcore hip-hop music in between the acts. It's like motherfucker, N-word, motherfucker, and his little abuela's there in a rocking chair on the veranda. and he's got twin brother and sister. He's got and they're twin. I think they're 8 years old now. And I did a set there where I just like was almost totally abortion jokes in front of these like 7-year-old kids, and his Hispanic grandparents just like rocking on the patio. That was one of my funnest gigs that I've done here in LA. But yeah, mostly it's not like the alternative scene is much more improv driven here than stand up. The improv scene here is ubiquitous, but also very strong, like a lot stronger, I think, than in the UK. There's a real school of it here. Yeah,
we hardly have any really in the UK, do we? There's the Comedy Store.
Yeah, it's starting to develop, like the idea of schools where you go through the levels and sort of training and improv. That's starting to happen in London,
right?
With a few different schools doing that. But here, you've got an embarrassment of riches in terms of improv schools and improv shows. That's the really big thing here, because that's SNL sort of has that history of coming from improv. I've not seen any good theatre in LA. It's all been terrible.
Oh no, really?
Yeah, because it's all like actors who are just trying to do showcasing for getting on TV, right? So there's zero craft, stage craft, nothing interesting in the theatrical sense. Basically, this town is incredible if you are in any creative industry, but it is also a very hard city to be in. If you're in a creative industry, you are expected to hustle your tits off. And I am someone, I think, who has, and this sounds arrogant, but I don't think it is, who has coasted on talent and has not put in a lot of hard work. And in the UK, that has really got me by. But here is really, it's kind of hobbled me, because I see people here who are not as talented as me, but they'll gig 4 or 5 times in a night, 5-6 nights a week, going and doing like open spots, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, and really hustle hard and work hard at getting really good. And I do not want to do that. That is not something that I am interested in doing. So that's why I've really eased off, because I like exciting, weird gigs where you can try out weird ideas and see how that goes. Whereas there's not a lot of appetite for that here, or there's just not a lot of, the culture isn't there to support that. What is here you are supported in developing those really tightly written, great stand-up sets. Which is just, it's never really been my thing. So I've taken more of a back seat, started writing more.
Well, you're saying that your night was called Alternative, just looking at the Alternative Comedy Memorial Society. Do you think there is still an alternative to the mainstream of comedy?
Yeah, of course there is. I think whenever you've got a mainstream, you'll have an alternative scene. And I think it sort of undulates between which one is which. You know, there are times when the alternative is the mainstream, like not the 9 o'clock news. That was the alternative that became the mainstream. And it's interesting being here, because there are real differences in the entire sort of comedy setup of both countries. Broadcast-wise, live-wise. Like the live comedy scene here, I think, is not great. I mean, I think probably I could be working harder to find more interesting things, and I think outside of LA it is a bit more vibrant and exciting. I think New York is maybe a bit where a lot of interesting stuff is happening. One of the best gigs I've had in America was actually in Olympia in Washington, which is where the Riot Girl movement began. And it was great. It was really fun, really warm, really like alternative. But I think the alternative live comedy scene in the UK is extremely vibrant because of the Edinburgh Festival. And I feel that comedians, because of the festival, so many comedians write a new hour of material every year. And here, that's considered, like, if you write an hour of material, you record it and put it out as a special. Like, if you've done an hour of material, you can tour the country by virtue just of having an hour of material, which to me is like, whoa, why? It's easy to write an hour of material. I mean, it's not easy, but like just having an hour of material shouldn't be like your marker for it being good enough to go on the road or to record it as a special. But that's what people do here. Like, once you get to an hour, that's it, and then you'll tour it maybe for a couple of years. You know, everyone thinks that Louis C.K. is incredible because he does that, because he writes an hour of material a year and tours it. But that most comedians in the UK do that every year. And because of that, I think it's a really fertile, creative environment. The festival pushes you to be more creative, and to really develop your voice, to enable to stand out, because you can develop an hour and go on tour, but what are you competing with then? Like Hairspray the musical at the local theatre and stuff like that. Whereas at the festival, there's 2,000 comedians. How do you stand out to your audience? You don't just want to stand out for standing out. It's like, how do you appeal to your audience? What is your voice? Who are you connecting with? Becomes so much more important, I feel, than here. It feels like, what is your voice? Can you develop your voice to get a TV special? The hustle is more important than your talent. Like, I feel like here it's like 90% hustle. And people just write and write and write and submit and submit and submit. They try and do as many shows as possible. They try and do as many like workshops as possible. there is a lot of... There's things like Reductress, which I love. I think it's so funny. Have you seen that or read any... It's like it's a satirical online women's magazine.
Okay.
So like The Onion, but a women's magazine instead of news.
Right.
And it's so funny, and it has some of the funniest, most sort of incisive and sharp writing. But they don't pay their writers.
What?
Which is nuts to me, because I think of ideas and stuff that I would love to write for them, and then I'm like, God, is it worth it? Because you have to pitch a bunch of ideas to them. You can't just be like, oh, here's an article I wrote, do you want it? You have to pitch to them like every Monday. At least this is how it was a couple of months ago. I don't know if it's changed, but maybe eventually they'll start paying their writers once they get enough advertising revenue or whatever. But I think that's some of the best writing that's happening, and it's not being paid. It's being written by women who are not getting paid.
But you have been doing some hustling, haven't you? You've been doing some auditions and things.
Yeah. No, it's been all right. It has really made me realise, though, that I do not want it as much as so many people here want it. I see people here and they're trying so hard and they're working so hard, and I'm just like, I do not want to do that. So you have the job, because you deserve it more than I do. And I'm fine with that. It's made me a lot happier. I love acting. Don't get me wrong. I love it, and I think I'm brilliant at it. That's one thing I've got from being in America, is being able to talk about myself positively a bit more.
Good. Yeah.
When I came here first, I was like, I'm rubbish, don't put me in anything. Because I feel that's how our British sensibility is.
Yes, yeah.
Like, we're conditioned to be like that. To be proud of yourself or confident in the UK is seen as being disgustingly arrogant and gross and immodest. Whereas, I was having meetings and being like, oh, don't use me, I'm terrible. And just doing that British thing of like, what I really mean is I am great, please do use me, give me the job. But Americans don't understand that. So when you go into a meeting and you're like, oh, God, me, I'm shit. I am shit, mate. They're like, oh, God, they're shit. Why did we call them in for a meeting? I think I'm really good at acting, but the stresses here are way bigger than they are in the UK, I think. Because everyone here is really beautiful. And you go into a casting and, it's all code. So they have code for real, right, meaning not beautiful.
Oh, God.
To character, meaning unattractive.
Jesus.
So there's like attractive, real character, and most of the auditions that I get are real to character.
Nice, jeez.
Which is like, that is miserable to be like, oh God, because I don't think I'm unattractive, but in Hollywood terms, I am a minger.
So ridiculous, isn't it?
I'm a fat minger.
Yeah, you're obese in America. So
yeah.
Is it a kind of is it that everybody looks the same? Is there a kind of a consistent, like, blonde tanned thing going on? That's what I'm imagining.
I mean, there's a little bit of that. It's also just like, I'll go to an audition for something, and just all the girls there will be just so well turned out. And for a long time, I didn't have a car here, so I was cycling to auditions. So I was just the sweatiest person in the room.
Yeah.
And so many of these girls, like they've just stepped out of the salon.
Yeah.
Like perfect hair, just beautiful makeup. Like, and I'm there with a wet crotch because it's Los Angeles, and I've bicycled there. And that is something you can't avoid.
Oh.
And my hair would be like frizzy and gross. And I don't doubt my ability to be funny or to work well on camera. But I think the first impression is when somebody watches those rushes, they see someone who looks presentable versus someone who looks like a hot mess. And it doesn't matter really how good you are if you can't get past that initial shock.
Do you find that your Britishness works in your favour at all? Is that like a charming thing that they like?
No, I thought it would. I thought it would. I went to a couple of casting workshops, and I think sometimes it can, but most of the time I'm going for American parts.
Oh, right.
And for a while I was like, oh, hi, do you want me to do this in American? And thinking it would really impress them when I'm like, oh, I'm just going to do the lines and it's going to be awesome. But it turns out that they are not very imaginative, and I think a lot of the times going in and doing that just plants a seed of doubt in them to be like, oh, they don't understand. They won't be relatable. Yeah. So now I tend to go in and do the whole thing, including like from the waiting room onwards in an American accent, even though I feel like a charlatan.
Wow.
The whole time.
That's amazing. Do they know?
It's taken me a long time.
Can they tell?
To get to that point. No, not unless I start. If they start talking to me a lot and asking me questions about myself, then I start to go into that weird Catherine Zeta-Jones transatlantic voice, because I feel like too much of a liar.
Yeah.
To be, you know, when they're like, oh, so where are you from? And if I'm like, I'm from Wales, my dad's Iraqi, like I feel like too much of a liar to do that. Yeah. So I end up going into this weird transatlantic voice to sort of soften that. I'll tell you a little thing about me, Layla. I love to craft. And I always have done. I've always loved making stuff. And the only problem with it, not the only problem, the biggest problem with it is that it makes me into a hoarder. Because in everything I see the potential for something anew, which like worked in the case of my GCSE art project, because I'd been saving the wrappers off of Quality Streets for about 2 years. And then I used them in a collage I did. But I ended up like not being able to throw away clothes or fabrics and stuff like that, because I'm like, well, what magical new thing can I fashion out of them? And I feel like I am such a creative person that that's just like, it's almost like a mechanism to deal with being a creative person, is having all of these different outlets. I feel like if I wasn't good at those kind of things, I probably would be a better writer or a better performer, because I spread myself out on like making things, writing things, cooking things, sewing things, but I enjoy being a sort of polymath. It's a curse and a blessing, isn't it? Because I do feel like if I wasn't interested in, because not necessarily I don't think I'm a terrific sewer or a terrific crafter. I just really enjoy it, and I enjoy making new things. But if I wasn't interested in it, then I could much more easily focus on, one or two things. Because as it is, like, I find myself every day being like, what do I do today? Because I love so much stuff. I love dancing. I love singing. I love writing. I love performing. I love crafting, like sewing, making things like jewelry and art pieces, painting, writing music, writing songs. So much stuff that it's all distracting, and it means that I never really focus on anything unless I have to, which is like why deadlines and commissions are a real gift to me.
Yeah, it's a curse. I can see how it's a curse, but it's also I think it's like an unrecognised blessing in a way, because I feel like society is obsessed with specialists and sort of doesn't like, somehow, especially of women, it's very unforgiving of the idea that you might want to try or be good at lots of different things. I feel this is like, if there's somebody, I'm just thinking like off the top of my head, someone like John Ronson, what does he do? Well, he writes books. What are they about? Well, they're all about different things. And he also does TV stuff, and he also does these radio programs about different things. And it's like, well, how does he get away with it? If I don't know, Joe Brand was to do that, it'd be like, oh, Joe Brand, who used to be a stand-up, is now doing all these things. And there's not really any like model in our heads for a kind of female polymath in that way or something.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought about that, but I think there is a kernel of truth in it. I think, men are rewarded for being good at different things and good at lots of things, but whereas I think it's that thing. I mean, it's lots of things, isn't it? But women being, especially if you don't have a family and you don't have kids, you're expected to really focus in on that career.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you're expected to be excellent in your career to make it worthwhile for you.
That's it.
Opting out of having a family.
Yes.
Yeah. Whereas if you're just like, I want to be a decent enough photographer that my Instagram is pleasant to look at, and a good enough joke writer that my tweets are amusing, and I want to be able to put pockets in my dresses because I enjoy it and it makes them 100% more awesome. People are like, but why aren't you having a baby? And I do feel like you're right in that there is no real... I feel like there's so many men where are like, oh, they did this and now they did this. You know, Michael Palin, who's a comedian and a writer and a TV broadcaster and a travelling man.
Yes, he's a travelling man, yes. Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, exactly.
Whereas where I'm sure we'll think of loads once we stop recording.
I don't know, maybe I'm just sort of being unduly negative. I'm just thinking about people like Hugh Laurie, for example. Like, he was a silly comedian and then he became a very serious actor in America. But then he also does things like boxing, which is quite exciting. But like everything he does is cool, and like it's like, oh yeah, that's great that he did that. Like it's like a round of applause every time he does anything. Yeah, I mean, Stephen Fry, what's he? Like, what does he do?
Yeah, he's considered a polymath, isn't he? Because he's a writer and a comedian and a host and an actor. But then you've got people like Zooey Deschanel, and she's an actor and she's also a musician, but I feel like she's kind of almost ridiculed for that, or like not taken seriously as a musician.
Yes.
Or it's considered like part of their talent rather than two strings to their bow. Do you know what I mean? Like do people consider Beyonce a director as well as a musician? Because she directed a lot of Lemonade. And a choreographer and a dancer. Like, it's all considered like, oh, that's just your job, isn't it? If you're a pop star, you have to sing and act, sing and dance and stuff.
Well, Victoria Wood, amazing musician, and kind of recognised as a comedian, I suppose, or a comedy writer. And she was relatively recognised, but nowhere near as much as she should have been, given she's more talented than Stephen Fry. Like, she never really got credit.
Yeah. But did anybody really consider her as a comedian, a writer, a stand-up, a actor and a musician? Like, it was all just like, oh, that's just what she does, that's her thing.
Yeah, and you're just sort of and you're almost like just a phenomena that exists in the world. Yeah,
whereas I think that Stephen Fry is definitely considered an actor, a comedian, a presenter, a writer of novels, you know, like all of those things are seen as distinct art forms that he's conquered, rather than, oh, that's just part of your package. Maybe it's just that as a woman you have to be able to be multi-skilled to get ahead.
But I like the thing of conquering. I think that's a very revealing word that you used. I think that's perhaps partly what it is. The idea that, you know, as a man you go out and like slay all these different arenas of expertise, and and as a woman you just come with it all.
Because also this is a very lonely city.
Oh, really?
Like, the loneliest city that I've ever lived in. Because the city's so big, if you're on public transport, it takes a long time to get places. So you need a car, but that means you also spend a lot of time in your car alone. And because everyone's sort of doing their own thing, and almost, you know, so many people in the city are in some creative industry in one way or another, in a way that sort of connects you, but also in another way it makes it kind of boring.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Because like, everyone you meet, it's like, what are you working on? Oh, we should get together and work on something. Like, yeah, okay, that's definitely going to happen. What's your new podcast? Because literally everyone has a podcast, and it's just people talking with very little production. When's your next? Please invite me to your next improv show. I'm never going to come. So there's a real superficiality to a lot of it, and just the real spread outness of it, and everybody working on their own stuff.
Yeah, you are painting quite a bleak picture.
The thing is, the reason that you stay is because it is beautiful, and it's a very fecund place for creativity and a lot of cool stuff. And California is amazing. You have everything here. Like from here, I'm 2 hours away from the desert, from the mountains, from not even 2 hours, like within 2 hours, from the beach, from the Pacific Ocean. I'm 6 hours from San Francisco. I'm 2 hours away from Mexico. There's everything. You can go skiing in Big Bear in the winter, and that's like a 2 hour drive away. You can go to Palm Springs and pretend like you're Frank Sinatra. And it's a beautiful summer day every day of the year, which I generally love. Because I realised that in London, you're so oppressed by how grey it is. Not even the rain, just the fact that it's grey. Also, the cost of living is very cheap here.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Tax here is weird, but they don't tax booze very highly, so booze is very cheap.
Okay.
Like crazy cheap. Like it's cheaper to buy scotch here than in the UK and bring it over, even though they have to import it.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Amazing. So have you become an alcoholic? Are you working on it?
No, I don't have a very addictive personality, but I have been enjoying limeritas.
Okay.
Which are it's like a fake margarita made by Bud Light. They're sort of awful, but I really like them.
It sounds quite refreshing, actually.
It is refreshing. I get them, especially when I go to the baseball. God, I sound like a real Yankee Doodle.
Yeah, Yankee Doodle. It's exactly what you are.